All right. Hello, everyone. We have a special guest here this morning on A Soccer Fan Walks Into a Bar. My name is Dave with CDU Newburgh, and we have Luke Sassano, the chief scout for Nashville SC. So first off, Luke, thank you for spending some time in your busy schedule with us this morning. We really appreciate it. And how are things?
Yeah, no, listen, awesome to be on. I know we've been trying to do this for months now, so appreciate your patience with the summer
No,
window.
I appreciate your, doggedness in what you do. And, I spent a little bit of time at the collegiate coaching level and the club coaching level, and I have absolutely zero concept of what goes into your job. I'm sure it is absolutely ridiculous with time zone changes and various meetings that you're having with professional clubs and agents and youth clubs and the whole nine. And, we could spend another 4 hours just talking about that. But I do want to get to some other stuff. First and foremost, congratulations on the U.S. Open Cup title. Yeah, it was a great run for you guys. I want to ask is, when you guys have your preseason meetings and off-season meetings, is this something we talk about? Are we gonna, do we put our eggs into the U.S. Open Cup? Obviously, there's been a ton of discussion about the importance of U.S. Open Cup and the lack of MLS teams, in there and competing. Is this something that your front office talks about doing? Are we fighting on two fronts with MLS as well? What's the plan here for Nashville?
Yeah, definitely. From a leadership perspective, without speaking for anyone, our ambitions are to win really any competition we're in. Just I think from an onset, some teams maybe are more focused on one competition at certain points of the season other than the others. But the Open Cup is obviously a great competition to be a part of. And so we've always valued that. Mike, our general manager, has been a part of two previous U.S. Open Cup champions at Sporting Kansas City. So he's obviously done a great job in terms of having that as an emphasis with our group. But, to win a cup, first and foremost, a lot of that obviously comes down to the coaches and the players, right? At the end of the day, my job is to support the club, helping to find players, have conversations about players, and always looking, 6 months ahead. What do we need in the next window next season? So as much as I appreciate the words and congratulations, definitely it's a moment to reflect on that. Our fans have been with us now for the last several years and have been great supporters, and the fact that we could bring them a cup and a championship, which leads us into another bigger competition next year, is really exciting for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's definitely an on-field thing. Does the leadership priority, or you start going on a run? Obviously, the summer window can be a little bit wonky for MLS clubs, but if and when you get to a point where you're continually successful in that year's Open Cup, is there any maybe change in plans in terms of bringing in other players for a semifinal and final run, or do you guys have your plans kind of locked in, loaded, and you stick with your season plan that you started in December, January?
Yeah, no, great question. I'll probably talk a little bit more in generalities because
Sure.
BJ and his coaching staff do kind of more of obviously the roster and the game in, game out, strategy. I know it gets complicated just from my own experiences when you get in the summertime, because sometimes you'll have games Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Thursday, Sunday, and throwing in the Open Cup. So a big piece of it is, having a medical staff that can keep guys on the field too, as well, is another big piece of loading. But I do think Open Cup is a great opportunity for younger players and guys to seize opportunities. And you could see that with, Brian Schwakey, for instance, being the starting goalkeeper, in the championship and the final. So just there's certain moments where guys will get their opportunities to play. And I think that's always an exciting thing that the Open Cup, for me as a player, that was my opportunity when I was a young player to get in and showcase myself. So I do think just because of where MLS is right now, from a competitive standpoint, every weekend it's a dogfight. Every team in this league, which is exciting because there's a lot of parity, which makes it exciting for fans, is that anybody can win on any day.
Yeah, and a lot of travel along with that as well.
Totally. And that's, not to jump into recruitment, but that's another piece of it when we talk to agents and players. Europe, South America, unless you're playing in Libertadores in South America, the travel is maybe Brazil's a little bit different, but they do their state league, so it's a little bit different. But in Europe, you may go, in England, you're doing buses. In Germany, you're doing buses and maybe a short flight. But, when we got to go play, San Jose, that's a little bit challenging, right? You're going from time zone, you're going weather changes. So those are all also piece of our recruitment, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Building off that U.S. Open Cup run, and now, hopefully a little bit of a playoff run for you guys. Sam Surridge had an absolutely incredible season. For my money, overshadowed really, at least in the East, only by the one and only Lionel Messi. And we'll talk about him a little bit later. But what does it mean, from your recruitment standpoint and for the club as a whole to be able to bring in a quality player like Sam Surridge, who, contrary to like Messi or Thomas Muller now in Vancouver, who's really just getting into his prime and had a lot of that European experience. How does that change the outlook of the club and MLS in general?
Yeah, definitely. Listen, Sam's journey had different stops along the way, before he came to us. Obviously, he had a stop in Bournemouth.
Including Bournemouth right here. So
yeah, stop in Bournemouth. He's obviously at Nottingham, where we got him from. We also got him, in a window before BJ had arrived, right? So I think when we were recruiting Sam and scouting Sam, and you got to give a lot of credit, number one, to our ownership to be willing to spend that type of money to get a player in his prime to come from the English, Premier League, where he was spending the part where we got him, but also in terms of our leadership group, right, from Mike Jacobs, Chance Myers, Oliver Farrell, to make that decision to bring in a player. And then at the end of the day, Sam took a courageous step in his career. Believed in the project, believed in coming to Nashville at the age of 24, and really wanted to start something and build something for himself. So got to give a lot of credit to him. But also at the end of the day, he's really flourished under, BJ's system and what him and his coaches have brought to the club. And that's been super exciting. We've always seen him, we're a club that uses a lot of data, and especially in our scouting as well. We're heavy in data scouting. So a lot of Sam's underlying numbers, you always knew there was going to be a moment where he was going to hopefully hit the expectations. And so far, he's done a really good job since he arrived. And then this year, pairing up top with Hani, the way our team is playing from an attacking identity, he's getting his opportunities to score goals, which is exciting.
I agree. Him and Hani Mukhtar, obviously, super teams aside, and obviously what Son and Bawanga are doing out west has been nothing short of incredible. But for to be building something like that with Mukhtar and now Sam Surridge, it really is a good look. Two in their prime players that came here. Maybe I don't want to say with uncertainty, but like you said, it was a jump for them to and a risk potentially to come to the U.S. and play. You're awfully, we've chatted offline a couple of times too. You're pretty humble about, your career and what you've done. What does it mean for you personally to have been able to brought in a guy like Sam Surridge, who for a lot of clubs flew under the radar and now is scoring 20, 25 goals a season, here in the MLS? I know, you're going to give credit to BJ and the rest of the squad, but, it is a nice little feather in your cap. How does that feel?
It feels good always to be a part of something that ultimately works out. So I'm definitely a small piece in that storyline, because when you scout and bring in a player, there's a lot of things that go into that, right? There are different vantage points. There are different people involved in the organization that will determine whether that player will be successful from what you think he will be. So, and that at the end of the day, what I've really seen, it comes down to the player himself. And Sam is as motivated and as hardworking as they come. And he's a striker. And so, when you bring in a striker, they have to have short-term memory loss, right? When you miss a chance, even against Miami, he had a couple awesome opportunities that didn't go his way, but then he's still chugging along and pushing and gets his goal. So I think there's a certain mentality that we at least try to scout and recruit about. Can we get those players that have that mentality, that are willing to come here and put in the work? And that's what the standards are at this club. It's not for every, club in terms of players that they want to bring in, but we really value that mentality piece of the player. For sure.
Going back to, like you said, the Miami game. Speaking of Sam Surridge and pre-mentioning Lionel Messi. Obviously, you are Nashville through and through right now. What is it like to be competing against Messi? I mean, I've been extremely fortunate. I got to watch him in a World Cup qualifier down in Chile. I've seen him a couple of times when he came to NYCFC. But I can, despite being a fan of NYCFC, can look at it as a neutral fan. You are, an employee of Nashville watching Messi on the other side of the pitch from you. I mean, do you get starstruck, or is it just like business as usual for you? What's that like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll try to be as politically correct as possible. Watching Messi throughout his career and what he's done, he's untouchable in that way. As I see him, one of the, if not the greatest player to ever play the game, especially in our generation, in terms of what we've seen him and Cristiano, what they've been able to do in the field. Now that he's playing in MLS, and he's playing in the East, he's going to be a competitor and he's going to be competition. So first and foremost, we want to win. And I think all of our players respect the opponent when they step on the field. But at the end of the day, it's how can we exploit and do things that can help us to win the game. Again, Messi is an anomaly. You could probably see in our match on the weekend where he gets one opportunity and he scores a goal. So he is in himself his own type of player, his own. We call it the Messi profile, and that's just something that as a fan for the sport and game in general, people being able to witness and see that live in the U.S. is quite remarkable. So it's something it's exciting to be a part of. At the other time, it makes games difficult too when you're playing against them. So you got to score goals for sure when you're playing against Miami.
All right. Well, speaking of Miami and decision day, obviously it was unfortunately a 5-2 loss, but right back at it for a 3-game set now with Miami. And say what you want about the playoff format. I know a lot of fans are not wild about it, but to potentially play Miami now 4 matches in a row has got to be a little bit crazy. They seem to have your number lately. I believe they've won the last 5 across all competitions, unbeaten in 9. Obviously, that's something Nashville is looking to change. And I'm not asking you to give me, tactical nuances, but what are we expecting here? Will we see anything a little bit differently in this playoff series from Nashville?
I think number one, you're going to take our game experiences against them, and like any team would do, it's to figure out how can we worry about ourselves and be better. I think when you think about playing against an Inter Miami team that's very talented, even outside of Messi, they have players all across that field that can impact the game, especially in the front 4. So I know BJ and his staff, every game, they're meticulous. They do a fantastic job of preparing our guys with a game plan each week. So I think this will be no different in terms of preparation style. Obviously, when you're playing against a player like Messi, it's not so much about containment, but it's about being aware when he's on the field, because he's going to get his opportunities to do things, and it's how can we limit those type of opportunities.
Yeah, I agree. You're not taking Messi out of a game. There are those clubs that can do that are few and far between. I'm thinking back to like those great defensive like Chelsea squads or something, and obviously no knock on MLS teams, but they just don't have the manpower to handle something like that on a regular basis.
Yeah, I would say another piece of that is you have to also go into each game as though it's a new game, and I think our players are mature enough and well experienced enough to go through that process too. These are guys that have been to playoffs. Most of these guys have been to playoffs almost every year we've been in existence, right? So,
not to interrupt you, but do you think the U.S. Open Cup run might be a benefit because of that? Now you've been in championship matches, you've been in knockout matches, you've been in must-win games, and you came out on the good side of that and brought home a trophy already. Do you think that experience will push them maybe to a little bit next gear position?
I hope so. I think I think anytime you're in those critical games, they just give you a little bit more experience as well to go to the next step. We have a great group of veteran guys that have been there, playoffs, winning championships as well. And obviously recently the Open Cup, that will lean on those experiences too. So I think that's the exciting piece of it, is that we also create opportunities against teams we play against. So we know we will be in every game. And I think that's really an exciting piece about it. You're going to play against Miami, which I think will be a really fun series for the fans too.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
Hopefully we'll be able to come out with some results in it, but ultimately it's going to, the MLS playoffs, like I mentioned earlier, the parity in the league, especially in the Eastern Conference. I mean, it is, teams are every weekend. It's the little details that will result in wins or losses for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I've been kind of living and dying by that with NYCFC, for example.
Yeah.
Pascal Janssen has had runs where they've been, for my money, one of the best clubs in the league, and other runs where I didn't know if we were going to be even in the playoffs. So the parity and the tightness within the Eastern Conference specifically this year has just been second to none, but it's been fun for the neutral to be a part of. So
yeah.
Let's flip things around a little bit. I want to talk some about U.S. soccer and how some of those potential changes might affect you from a scouting standpoint. For years now, on and off, MLS has kind of flirted with maybe going to the European calendar. We talked about it a little bit offline in months past. There does seem to be a little bit of traction post World Cup here of maybe going to that fall to spring calendar. From a scouting standpoint, recruitment standpoint, is that good? Is that bad? What do we think changes might be afoot with that?
Yeah, no, there will definitely be positives, and then things that you walk away from that maybe were advantageous to the MLS market, in terms of, when you're dealing with a European window that is halfway through their season, which is our first primary window. You're always going to get some opportunities for loans and players that could be available because they're not playing with their European team. So there's some situations that prices may be more reasonable for MLS clubs. But having on the flip side of that, prices are sometimes even more expensive because say you want to go out for a striker that's scoring goals, the team's in the midseason form.
They don't want to lose their guys.
They don't want to lose their guys, right? So there's that other flip side of it, which makes it challenging. When we get to the summer window, we want to get guys in, but how much does it translate? This summer window, I believe when the window closed, there's 10 games left, right, in the season. So you're spending time, energy, resources to get a player in. They need to get adapted to the environment. They go through their own preseason. They got to get their visa. Then by the time they get that, how impactful will they be?
Right. It could be a huge swing and miss, from that standpoint. And then, not only is that a budgetary issue, but you've put your eggs in that basket for a playoff run. And if someone falls flat, where are we? So, it's definitely
exciting to see if that comes to when and if that comes to fruition. I think you're going to see different positive strategies that'll come out of it.
Yeah. Sure. Also on the U.S. soccer front, and you're a former college player, go Golden Bears.
Go Bears. Go Bears.
U.S. Soccer has released some recommendations about the college game and the NCAA, potentially pushing for the similar calendar year, as well as some iteration maybe of like promotion relegation within geographic regions. But as a former college player, you went through the draft system, drafted by Red Bull, I believe. How will that change impact the scouting process? Because now, the Super Draft used to be in December, January. If they're pushing it now to May, June, potentially, how will that impact the league and your scouting process?
Yeah, it's a great point. I think there's some things that we just don't know fully how they'll impact until it happens. When I was a college player, we always felt the fall season was a long season, but is also at the same time too short. So I think players now, and we got to remember that NCAA is an academic institution, right? Academic and athletics. And so that was always the biggest push. I think now as you're seeing the NIL movement go into obviously the big sports, football, the big revenue generators, and now down to soccer, even, we're competing. Sometimes some colleges can convince players to come back on an NIL deal versus signing an MLS Next Pro deal. So those are certain parts of it that I'll be interesting to see how that evolves in the system. In terms of timing, I think it's always good when players are playing games.
Yeah.
So for college players to be playing a full season, I think will be exciting for their development. College has always been an important piece of our developmental pyramid in the U.S. soccer system. So I'm a believer in players develop at different times and different windows and need different experiences. And I think college offers that. I mean, you could go through the draft as recent as Patrick Agumon that just got sold, to Darby County for almost $10 million, right?
Yeah.
So there's value in the draft, and it'll continue to be there for sure.
Yeah, I to your point with load management and all that stuff that we mentioned, we I think probably played in college right around the same time. You at Cal, I played at Manhattan, and like you said, it feels like it's a long season but a short season at the same time. Obviously, we're not getting the cushy flights that European powers and slowly MLS clubs are starting to get. So those are some long bus rides. And you're packing in, 20, 25, sometimes 30 matches into a 2.5 month season. So, the breakdown of bodies at that point is certainly a factor too. So I think obviously this is outside of the scouting realm, but I do think in the long run, it's probably better for, the American player or the collegiate player from that end.
Yeah. And to that point, there's been a big influx of foreign players, international players into the collegiate system and the market. And there's been as you've seen, homegrown players and signings be a part of MLS clubs, MLS Next Pro opportunities for that. Historically, the age range for developing players, 17 to 20 some are going to MLS Next Pro environments, which makes sense as well. You're starting to see an influx of a diverse player pool now that's coming to the collegiate system, which I think is also exciting to see. So I'll be interested, obviously, to follow it. On our end, we value college, we value the draft. We're not going to be picking as high this year.
It's a good problem to have.
It's a good problem to have. But we've always valued, the draft and finding players that potentially could fit, how we want to play. But we'll definitely see how that goes, because again, playing a full college season, then coming halfway through an MLS Next Pro season as it stands right now might be challenging. But when we flip the calendar and the calendars are mirrored up, that actually could be the best opportunity for everybody involved, for sure.
All right, let's chat a little bit about some of your past endeavors. You've been extremely fortunate with the career. Even at the Division III colleges that I've coached at, I always felt like super fortunate to be a part of that. You've been able to be a part of relatively young clubs with Cincinnati and Nashville. Resurrected brands like Cosmos, historic clubs like Fiorentina. Being an American at Fiorentina, was that a challenge for you from a front office standpoint, and how has that impacted what you're doing today in terms of the global scouting?
Yeah, totally. I've always tried to put myself in uncomfortable situations. I've always seen that as a growth driver, especially in my career, to try to figure out how can I learn, improve, and grow. I think Fiorentina, like you mentioned, every opportunity is a great opportunity, and fortunate to have those opportunities. Fiorentina, when Rocco Commisso, who was the former owner of New York Cosmos, bought Fiorentina, he brought in a close friend of mine who passed away last year, Joe Barone, to be his general director. And so Joe brought me into the fold in Fiorentina. I understand about 30% of Italian. My family background's Italian.
Yeah, that's a lot better than most of us. So,
yeah. So that was exciting, because I'd be sitting in some scouting meetings, and the way Fiorentina was set up is we had 8 scouts worldwide. And so one of my markets was North America and England and a little bit Germany, but there are 8 of us. And so when we do our scouting meeting, it was all in Italian. And then they get to the American guy, and I'm talking in English, but also trying to digest what everybody has been talking about in their certain markets, right? And having some understanding and awareness of that. So for me, it was a great just worldly understanding about how Italy works in terms of when you look across Europe, every country has their cultural influences in terms of scouting, business, operations, and seeing how Italy works from player transactions to scouting and recruitment to development was a great opportunity in my career to see that. And for sure was fortunate to be a part of it. And obviously Fiorentina is now, Joe's passed, unfortunately, but they've built a brand new training facility. They're a club that had I believe last year they had a great run. So it was a fun time to be a part of it, but definitely a great learning experience for sure.
Yeah. So, speaking of Joe and Rocco, you were at Cosmos for, the better part of 5 years. They will now be again resurrecting and re-entering the U.S. soccer pyramid via USL League One. I've actually chatted with some of the guys, involved. What are your thoughts on another venture now in Jersey with such an iconic brand, that is Cosmos? It's, one of the few names that you throw it anywhere across the world and people know the Cosmos. What's that like?
Yeah, no. Well, first of all, the Cosmos were held a special place in my heart, just in general. I met some great friends, some great people. I have to give a lot of credit to Eric Stover and Gio Savarese for giving me an opportunity to be a part of that club. Eric is now the person in charge that has resurrected the Cosmos and brought them back. You could argue that brought them back to their home state, going to Jersey, right? So, as a fan of the club, I wish them the best. I'm excited to see how, historically, and when we were in New York, we had the challenge of needing to bring in players that would put butts in the seats, right? So from Marco Senna, Raul, but also Gio did a fantastic job of creating a atmosphere that we could recruit, MLS players, Adam Moffat, Hunter Freeman, guys that could play at the MLS level, but that wanted to come play for the Cosmos. So we felt we had a team at that point where the NASL was and the MLS was that we could compete with MLS clubs. Now, obviously, MLS has taken a completely different jump, and the NASL does not exist anymore.
Right.
So, but at the same time, to see the Cosmos come back, it's exciting to see that brand because it's such a special brand.
I agree. I definitely plan on getting down to Patterson for a few matches. Based on what I've heard from them and what they want to do with the stadium and just the entire package there, it's both realistic and potentially a big leap forward for them in what they want to do. And I do think they have big dreams, down the road. So,
yeah, no, I've spoken to Eric since he's jumped on that project. And have you guys spoken yet on your podcast?
I've not spoken with Eric yet. No.
Okay.
Maybe we can make that happen.
Yeah, no, definitely. He's a great vehicle for soccer. He went abroad. He ran a club in Denmark. He's another person that is a big believer in youth development. He's a big believer in the American soccer player. So he's a guy that's been in different spaces. Red Bull, he's the managing director. He's actually part of the group that drafted me to Red Bull. So I still have another thing I got to thank him for and part of that. But it would be a great conversation because I think they're trying to do the right things there.
Yeah, no, I like I said, I'm all for the growth of the pyramid. Obviously, we could, I'm sure, talk another day about the potential of Pro Rel and throughout all of U.S. soccer, but that's we don't have enough time for that. So thank you again, Luke. I appreciate it. For those of you that are just joining us, is Luke Sassano, Chief Scout for Nashville SC. Thank you again for taking the time with us, and best of luck against Miami in the playoffs.
It sounds good. We'll make sure to catch up at the end of the playoffs and hopefully as well into December.
Let's do it.